Hello and welcome to the Anfield Wrap. I'm Harriet Pryor and today I'm joined by Mo Stewart, Shaun and Ian Ryan. And it's really cold, isn't it, Mo?
Oh my God, it's awful. I didn't actually think that England ever got this cold. It just reminds me of when I was in Minnesota, and I don't really want to be reminded of Minnesota when I'm in Liverpool. That's why I'm in Liverpool.
I'm all for the travel story there. But what I was going to say is a really seamless transition to what's a really good thing to do when you're cold? Watch a Klopp documentary. Do you see how seamless that was?
It's better than getting out of the house, that's for sure.
Yeah. Shaun, have you watched the first episode and did you enjoy it?
I have indeed, and it was brilliant. I thought really well put together, and which, shouldn't be surprised about that, but it was surprisingly good, I'd say. It's just interesting, isn't it, to get his background and understand a little bit more about Klopp, because we all adore the man, we talk about him loads, but to really understand why he's like why he is, I think is really good. So yeah, loved it.
Yeah, it's nice thinking him because a lot of people wondered about how Klopp would want his story to be told, and it's not from him because he's such a selfless person. So going out and finding all the people from his life and his background and trying to bring that all together into one documentary has gone down really well, and everyone seems to really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, I think the feedback's been excellent, and I think, I would echo what Shaun said there. It comes across so well. It's brilliantly shot. And I think what resonated with me a little bit was we often talk about that first Klopp press conference, and they had similar thoughts when he comes in and talks about full throttle football, and I think they weren't quite sure he was going to be the man for them in terms of Dortmund, obviously where he'd been at Mainz and stuff, and maybe thinking back, I don't know whether any of us had reservations at the time. I think we were all made up to get him, to be honest, but it's a really, really good insight, and obviously it's only the start of the journey. There's more parts to come, isn't there? So
wow, look at that, another seamless transition. Yeah, Ian is right though. The challenge is out on YouTube now, and that is episode 1, and episode 2 is out for premium and video subscribers today, and that is called The Blueprint. So if you're not already a subscriber, you can download the app and get some free tokens to watch episode 2, and if you haven't yet watched episode 1, get yourself on the sofa, get yourself a hot chocolate, snuggle up and watch the Klopp documentary. And to give you a little taster of that, here is a clip from episode 2 now.
I was here for a lot of years, and the strongest part for us was the camaraderie in the dressing room. You get that right, and the other things fall into place.
Hat uns einfach vom ersten Moment an direkt abgegriffen und uns ganz klar seine Vision des Fußballs erklärt, und es gab auch nur einen Weg, und das war sein Weg.
The way Jürgen Klopp had been leading and getting people excited as a player, that worked even better as a coach.
The biggest thing was that he was having so much fun, and we were having so much fun working with him.
You could just see immediately he knew the formula for success. So when he said what to do, you did it.
Yeah, so that was a clip from episode 2, The Blueprint, which explores how Jurgen is able to affect immediate change in the atmosphere at each football club he's been at, both on and off the pitch. So that is on the app tonight for premium and video subscribers. So yeah, get yourself involved in that. Let's start in with the state of play, and I want to start with Diaz, and a bit of a negative note, because reports coming out yesterday suggest that he was undergoing surgery, and he's already put up an Instagram shot from his hospital bed today, and he could be sidelined until March. Obviously, the huge blow in terms of the games is that he's going to miss really key fixtures, most notably the Champions League fixture. And Klopp came out yesterday and he described it as a proper smash in the face, and it is, isn't it? It's a huge blow, because I think everyone thought coming back off this World Cup period, this would be the time now we could really kick on and be injury free, and then this is the first one that's fallen.
yeah, I think when he has the injury, the first thought is he could be missing for the whole season, and then you get the news that it's only going to be kind of 2 or 3 months, and you think, well, with the World Cup, that's not going to be too bad in terms of games missed. It's hardly any. And then you see him on the training pitch and stuff, and then to suddenly get the news that he's felt something in the knee. Is it the same knee that he had the problem with? Has that been
Klopp said it was a non-situation in training. He felt something, and then he didn't feel a lot the next day, but we wanted to be really cautious. So it doesn't sort of suggest whether it is the same thing or if it's a different injury concern.
I mean, if it is the same knee, you wonder whether there's anything, maybe he's brushed back a little bit too quick, or whether there's something he could have done slightly different in recovery and stuff. But I've not seen it, confirmed that it is definitely the same one. But it's just a massive blow, Harriet, because you'd argue before he gets the injury, certainly from an outfield player point of view, he's probably the player of the season in terms of...
He was a shining light in some really tough games.
He's putting in those performances, and I think he's hitting, 8s, 9s out of 10 on a regular basis. And I think it's probably a little bit underestimated just how good he was when he came to the club, and he'd almost settled immediately. And I don't think enough was made of it. I think actually in some quarters you got a little bit of criticism and stuff in terms of output, but to come in at the time he did and just settle the way he did and look like he's been part of the team and part of the squad for so long, I think it was an unbelievable kind of testament to him and his ability, and that ability just to settle and look like he belonged. And he was doing all the things you'd want of a player in a Klopp team in a wide area. So comfortable on the ball, retains possession really, really well. Has got goals to his game. I think that was maybe a little bit of a criticism that he could get more, but I think there were signs that he was putting himself in the positions this season. He was adding goals, and he was just someone who could get Liverpool up the pitch really, really quickly. He could beat a man. So to suddenly not have him, it just feels like a really, really significant blow, given the fixtures that you've just talked about there. But not only that, they've got a big job to get back in that top four, and you'd have to say someone like him, someone like Diogo Jota, I'm sure we'll come on to as well, they are people who you're almost hanging your hat on to come back into the team and really kind of spearhead that charge for top four.
Yeah, a lot has been made of him missing that Champions League fixture, but you're right, there's going to have to be a really big push to get back into the top four, especially if we're looking to do business in January. So Mo, we'll come to that, because Ian's just mentioned there, Jota won't be available, we think, until the February mark. Do you think this changes the focus in January? Because a lot of the conversation has been around a midfielder and the need to bring them in. Do you think we now need an attacker, and that has to be a priority in January as well?
I mean, it might do. It really might do. It depends, because as much as from what we heard, Jota will be back in February and Diaz will be back in March. The problem with those prognoses is we're still in December. So things could change in that time. It could get longer. And then you have to think about the reintegration process after such a long time, because it's been back-to-back injuries for both of them. So there's been most of this entire season, they've been in and out. So they would have to come back slowly. So then you're really looking at Millwall, maybe May, they'll be at their best. And that's the latest in the season. So in terms of having an attacking idea, the things that we've done so far, particularly towards the end of this Liverpool break, they look like they were working, but they still look like they're kind of short-term options. So I think we probably do need someone. Whether or not that's going to be the feeling within the camp, I don't know, because the difficulty of buying a player, an elite player, to do all those things that Ian said that Luis Diaz was brilliantly doing, is that Luis Diaz is still at the club, and next season he's going to be hopefully back doing all those things. So if we are going to be looking to buy a forward, we're going to need someone who's going to be able to play on both sides, because at the moment we don't really have one of those. Because if you look at Salah, Jota and Diaz, they all really play where they play. I mean, obviously Jota can play centrally as well, but we've tried both Diaz and Jota on the right, and they haven't quite been as good. I haven't quite nailed it to say they'll be able to do that going forward. So anyone who comes in, the short-term need might be on the left-hand side, but the long-term need is going to be on the right, probably, if we're looking at Mo Salah coming central later on in his career.
Yeah, Shaun, it does worry me a bit, because I think there's quietly now quite a lot of work to do in the January transfer window, and we haven't really been a team that's gone out and bought big players in the January window, and especially with the availability of the targets that we've already spoken about multiple times. We know they're not going to be available in January. Is there going to have to be a case where we sort of go a bit under the radar and do a bit more clever business, or do you think they'll just sort of accept their fate, accept this season, and it's going to go how it's going to go, and then work it out for the summer?
So I'm going to try and be a bit more positive about things, because I think it's important to not lose perspective. Diaz, obviously brilliant player, and was arguably our player of the season at the start of the season, which was arguably one of our worst starts of the season in a long, long time. So he was the shining light in a not so great clicking team. We click and we look a lot better when Salah and Núñez click together. Yeah. And I think that's something that's given me confidence moving forward. That gives me hope that actually Diaz will be, of course, we'd all want him back right now, and of course we want him to be here right now. But can we go and win football matches with Salah and Núñez up front? Absolutely, we can. The other thing to add is, obviously we beat Man City without Diaz. If you go back to January last year, we didn't have Salah or Mane, and that is arguably when we go on the run and get the momentum to go on the run that we went on at the end of last season. So I'm not so sure they will rush to the transfer market, to be honest. I think if you're judging a history and looking at what they've done previously, it's not what they do. And if all of their eggs are in the Jude Bellingham basket, which again we'll probably go on to talk about later, I'm not sure it makes sense
Can't
to go.
do a podcast without it at the moment.
I'm not sure it makes sense to go and spend a load of money on a quick fix striker or someone that's going to come in. I think the only way they do business is if they've maybe got someone that they've got their eye on in the summer next year, and they bring that forward
like
by 6 months.
Diaz, for example.
Exactly like that. And I think that's the type of thing that they'd be looking to do. But what I'd be doing, I mean, I still think that the issues lie in midfield for Liverpool. You know, okay, yes, it would be great to have Diaz back, as we've spoken about, but if Jota's back in February, that's not that far away to wait. As we spoke about then, Salah and Núñez have been clicking and have looked really good coming into the sort of the last part of the first part of the season. And Elliott and Carvalho, to add into that mix, are two good players. Now, Elliott went off yesterday, but Carvalho still looks sharp. He looked sharp yesterday. So I don't think we can go into it feeling like we've got no attacking options. I think we had a wealth of attacking options, and now all of a sudden we're just not as strong as we could be at full strength. So I think that you harness the power of all collectively coming together and realising we are in a bit of a fight here. And I think that's when Klopp gets the best out the players and when us as fans are at our best as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult though because, and I take Shaun's point to an extent, and I understand the Salah and kind of Darwin Núñez points, but you are now walking a bit of a tightrope because if, say for instance, Núñez picks up a knock, you're then down to Salah and Firmino, and I think we know at 31, Firmino's not a lad who can just keep playing where you're going to get the same level of performance. Now, to be fair to Firmino, he's added a lot more goals this season. Maybe one or two performances have dipped below what you'd want to see, but I think if you're only going to run three forwards for the next 2-3 months, that is really kind of walking that tightrope, and I think that's where Liverpool now find themselves in a position where they're going to have to make some decisions, and it might be some uncomfortable decisions. And Jurgen Klopp might think, well, when they're all fit, it's going to be difficult to juggle 6 lads. I understand that, but I think Liverpool have to react to a situation that is, you know, is it unlucky? Probably, yeah. But, you know, you have got now someone like Jota who is picking up more and more injuries, and I think sometimes with a slice of luck, you might get away with 5 forwards going into 3, because if you're going to play 3 all the time and you've got 5, you might get away with that. I understand it. You might get away with it. And if they're all robust and stuff, that feels okay to a point. But if one or two lads are picking up knocks and stuff, maybe you do need the 6th option and you're picking 3 from the 6th. And no, the manager may say that's too many, but at this moment in time, it's not. And I absolutely take the point about midfield, and that is a problem. It's been a problem for a while. But the young lads that have been mentioned there, I'm not yet convinced they're forward front 3 players. In the case of Elliott, I don't think he's got the pace to play in a front 3. I think he's a good footballer. He's on a bit of a journey. He's doing well. I think Carvalho, yeah, the jury's still out a little bit on where he's going to actually find himself in the team. Is he going to be a forward player? Is he going to be a midfield player? Not too sure yet, but I certainly wouldn't want to be seeing too much of him in a forward line. And I think if you've only got those 3 that we've talked about available, and yes, Jota might be back in February, but he is picking up more and more injuries. And if he comes back in Feb, but when's he up to speed, as Mo said? Is it March? Because that could be too late. Liverpool have played this high wire act before with the centre-halves, and he got away with it to an extent where they didn't go win the league, even though they are top of the league when the issues happen, but they end up getting top 4. But they get top 4 through a set of circumstances that see Chelsea and Leicester fall away, and there's goalies knocking headers in. and you're not always going to be getting that. Right. So I think they're going to have to make some decisions. And listen, we see where the ownership are. We see how serious they are, because if they are serious about still competing and doing all the stuff they've said they're going to do, despite maybe looking for investment or a sale, then I think things have to happen in January, both in the midfield area and in the forward line.
I'll come back to you on this one quickly, Ian, because I saw a tweet that's really harsh, including Darwin Núñez in here, and I'm going to caveat it with that, but it says that Jota, Diaz and Darwin have already missed more games for Liverpool than Bobby, Mo and Mane, which feels a bit wild to say, but it just does highlight the importance of having that really reliable front 3 that this season hasn't really been able to build the cohesion.
Absolutely. Availability is king, and obviously sometimes injuries just can't be helped. You can't legislate for certain injuries. If someone just takes you out completely, then there's nothing you can do about that. But I think, and for me, you know, Diaz was always a fairly robust player from what I'd heard and stuff. I don't know his entire history, but certainly when he came to the club, he looked like he was pretty robust. He was taking challenges, getting up, walking away. I think the Jota one's a little bit concerning when you're starting to see him pick up injuries, and again, maybe they just... his last injury, maybe they brought him back again a little bit too quickly and played him a little bit too, because he gets injured in that injury time period, doesn't he? Right at the end, I think it's 7 or 8 minutes in, and so maybe they'd ran him a little bit too much. And yeah, availability is massive, and what we had with Mane and Salah and Firmino, that original front three, they just never miss games. They just never miss football matches, and you can't put a price on just how valuable that is. And whilst I accept, there's a little bit of there's unluckiness to some of this, but as I say, the thing now is how do you react? And I think Liverpool have to react.
The problem Liverpool have in terms of those injury things is that all of what you said is very understandable. Injuries can happen, and law of averages said it's going to happen to everybody. But then you look at Mo Salah, and to a certain extent Sadio Mane when he was there, and you just think, well, he doesn't. And it's almost like, the film Unbreakable?
Yeah. How do you get the formula for everyone?
Well, I mean, we've got basically Salah and Mane, and to be honest, Gino Wijnaldum were Bruce Willis's, and everybody else is Samuel L. Jackson, which is a bit of a problem. So, to a certain extent, you have to kind of mitigate from the fact that both of them are almost at the extreme ends of each cycle. But the thing, like I said before, is that when you are in situations like Ian said, I do think with Jota he came back too soon because of the situation we were in. That's where you get to you lose your margin for error. You start to have to make those decisions, which is short term, you think, well, we've got to get him back on the pitch because we haven't got anyone else. But long term, think, well, it increases the chances of him getting injured again. And we have to remember, towards the second half of last season, we're talking about, does Klopp want to juggle 6 forwards? We had 7. And they all played.
Yeah, Minamino, Origi. Right,
Exactly.
well, I want one-word answers then. An attacker or midfielder priority for January, Ian? One word.
That's you'd say midfield, but I think they have to do business in both parts of the pitch.
No.
Can I say both?
No.
Damn it. Okay, midfield.
Midfield?
Okay. Well, some positive midfield news. Harvey Elliott was withdrawn on 28 minutes yesterday, but Klopp said that he got a knock, but I think we were lucky. He looks fine. He feels it, but that's normal. There was contact, so hopefully Harvey Elliott only out for a short period of time. Shaun, let's go on to the next thing on the state of play, and that's the World Cup players that we will now be rejoining the team. So Núñez is back today, Klopp thought, and then Henderson, Trent, Van Dijk, Alisson and Fabinho will have a week off before coming. So Konate is now the only Liverpool player, I think, that is still with the World Cup squad. It's pretty positive, isn't it, going into a busy stage of the season?
Yeah, it really is. And I think, following on from what we've just talked about around injuries and stuff, to touch wood, have nobody come back with any major knocks, I think is a massive boost.
Yeah.
And I think, all the players can be proud of the World Cups as well in different ways. Trent aside, I know he does get some minutes, and England don't go on to do what they probably thought they were going to do. So we can maybe have some positivity from that. But I think, they can all be proud. Henderson especially has really played the part. He fought his way into a team that he was dropped from and has kept his place throughout it, showing great leadership. And I think it's just great to have them back. You can see the disappointments on Van Dijk's face, and that's a slight concern. But knowing the character that he is, I think he's a really strong character, and I want to come back and want to prove to everyone why he's still the best defender in the world. So yeah, it's really positive to have them back, and I hope they all come back and are all fit next week when they come back.
Yeah, Mo, Shaun touched on it there, but the mentality thing we saw with Salah in particular coming back from AFCON, that he really suffered and found it hard to get back into his form with the sort of hangover from that. Do you worry about that with any of the players coming back from the World Cup?
I'd say Virgil only in as much as he's the only one who really had a similar experience to Salah in terms of, obviously Salah didn't get to take his penalty, whereas Virgil did and missed it. But having that kind of what-if moment, whereas for Fabinho and for Trent, as Shaun said, it's more a case of, well, why didn't I play more? So, and with Alisson, I don't think you can really blame him. Those Croatian penalties were right in the corner, so I do think it would be easier for these guys to shake it off than it was for Salah. Again, with Salah, it was the final as well. That makes a difference. So yeah, and when you compare it to maybe some of our rivals, obviously Arsenal, Gabriel Jesus is out for 3 months, so that's a big loss that they've got from the World Cup. For Manchester City, you've got the fallout from both Belgium and Germany, so like Gundogan and De Bruyne, and then Portugal for Bernardo Silva. They're all going to have come back from acrimonious clubs, and maybe that will help them when they all get together, or maybe those things will linger on their mind. You don't know. I don't really get that impression with our guys. I mean, Brazil looked like they were having a bus time until suddenly they weren't. And like we said with England, like our lads within the England camp, it's generally been a positive experience. So I'm positive that we won't have any kind of hangover from the tournament itself. I do wonder, though, if France win, whether or not Konate is going to be celebrating a bit too much.
Konate's always celebrating a bit too much. Ian, one real positive from the World Cup for me is the fact that the rest of the world has got to see how incredible Henderson is, not just as a leader and a person, but as a footballer. And I think he's probably a player that outside of Liverpool realm doesn't get the level of appreciation that we'd expect him to. But it's been nice that a lot of people seem to recognise that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have. I think you're still going to get people criticising him, and that's just the way football is and stuff. I think probably most people around this table would agree he's been nothing short of brilliant for the majority of his time at Liverpool. Certainly under Jurgen, I think he's coming to his own. I think there have been signs maybe across the last 12 months, 18 months, that maybe his performances are dropping a little bit at times just because of an age thing. And I think we ask so much of the midfield. I think it's difficult now maybe for Jordan in a Klopp midfield to do some of the things he was doing maybe 18 months ago if he's playing that right-hand side and if you want him to affect football matches game after game after game. I think there is a drop-off point naturally, and I think you've seen that where maybe he's picked up injuries and stuff as well. But I thought for England he was brilliant. I think at times I think he got loads of really positive comments from the pundits who were covering, who know what it takes to play in football matches of that magnitude, but also know what it takes to kind of to drag teams forward a little bit. And I know Kane is the captain, but I think most people would recognise that Jordan Henderson is doing a lot of what you would imagine a captain to be doing. I think he does drive the team forward, both on and off the pitch. He's always one of the first to come out after a positive and a negative result, and just talk a little bit about how he's feeling, how the team are feeling, how they're going to kind of recover from it, all that kind of stuff. But I think you saw it with his goal as well. What a fantastic goal when he links up with Bellingham, and he's driving into the box and stuff, and he takes it really well. I think he comes away from the tournament, he can feel incredibly proud of his performance. And listen, there's other England players who've done well. I think it's a bit of a shame that Trent didn't get more minutes, maybe from his own personal point of view. Listen, we can be happy that he's been wrapped up in cotton wool, apart from the Wales game when he gets maybe half an hour. But I think for the talent he's got, he'll be disappointed that he's not got more opportunity to showcase his ability, because if you're England and you're needing a goal, you need a creative spark, then he is someone you'd look to. But it's clear the manager doesn't fancy him, and I understand the kind of stuff with Kyle Walker, because Walker's a good defender, and I think he looked after Mbappe and stuff pretty well from a defensive point of view, but he doesn't give you the same kind of output going forward. So, but listen, that's England's loss. Hopefully he comes back kind of fit and fine, and I think for me, I don't really see the players coming back feeling too sorry for themselves, because I think there's so many games coming up, and I think this opportunity now is you can drive Liverpool forward, you can get back in the Champions League, you can go and put some of those wrongs right with your club football and get some positive results. So I don't see an issue for any of them, to be honest. I think they're of the mentality where they'll just look forward to getting back to playing club football again and putting some positive results on the board. So I think from a Liverpool perspective, it'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I bet they wish they had Trent on the pitch for some of those set pieces in the last 20 minutes of that game, but that's their loss, isn't it? Let's go on to talk about Henderson's mate, Jude Bellingham. You mentioned it there, the way they linked up really well, and there has been some interesting comments in the last week, and we have covered it quite a lot on the gutter, but we'll talk about it for you guys that haven't heard that. So Christian Felt from Build put out a statement last Wednesday, and he said, Mo, Liverpool are the favourites to sign Jude Bellingham from Dortmund next summer. Talks are more advanced than with Real Madrid, and the family of Bellingham prefers the transfer to LFC, which Rob Gartman absolutely loves. And David Ornstein has written in his column this morning, he will still have his pick of a small number of teams who can afford what it takes to complete such a deal. With his involvement in the World Cup now over, suitors will hope to intensify their efforts. There is a feeling among interested parties that Liverpool may be front runners, but they do not think the matter is closed and will hope the current uncertainty at Anfield plays into their hands. Do you think it plays into their hands?
Well, it depends upon what Bellingham and the family are hanging their hat on, really, doesn't it? It depends whether they're thinking part of him being at Liverpool is not only to work with the players and to work with the manager, but to be part of a team that's going to continue to evolve and go forward, and whether they have any of those kind of designs, because you've seen players have it in the past. Personally, he doesn't seem like that kind of kid to me, so I don't think it's going to be as much about that. The thing with the parents, and that's really the thing that we've all kind of hooked in on, isn't it? Because it's like, well, we all know what it's like. It's like if your mum and dad...
When your parents tell you to do something.
Yeah, exactly. when you want to make a really, really dodgy decision, and your mum and dad says it's okay, then things like, well, okay, if they think it's all right, then maybe it's all right. But also, I mean, we've seen with his old mate from Dortmund, Erling Haaland, how important that is. I mean, we've seen exactly how they've gone about it. From what I understand, he's been taking advice very much from Haaland and his family about how to go about it. So I would expect to see a very similar thing in terms of the way that they've assessed all the options in the teams and the criteria amongst them. So I do think that for us to be clear front runners amongst all of these circles, we have to have hit quite a few of those criteria. It's not just about Klopp. So I'm confident that it sounds like we're in a good position, but that last bit where it's like the other clubs still think we can mess it up from here. And let's face it, as fans, we all kind of fear that too, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. Shaun, David Ornstein talks about the current uncertainty at Anfield, and there's kind of, for me, two elements of that. There's the on-the-pitch uncertainty and the fact that we haven't necessarily guaranteed Champions League qualification. That's going to be a big uphill struggle for the sort of next part of the season. We'll start with that. Do you think it hinges on that, or do you think Bellingham would sort of say, okay, well, I know they've not got it this season, but let's work from here and progress from there? Yeah,
no, I don't think it's that it hinges on that at all, because, I mean, first and foremost, the Champions League is going to be 5 teams moving forward in a couple of years' time, so I think that strengthens our chance of being involved pretty much year in, year out. I think if we... just going on previous history and where we've been over the last 4 or 5 years, I think everyone can understand why we don't quite look like we're sort of, or why there's a potential risk that we might not make the top 4. But I think a lot of people would still back us to make the top 4 from this position moving forward. So I don't think it'll hinge on that. I think what looks important to him and what you can see from the outside is, I think that the sell to perfect is Liverpool. The sell to Liverpool is perfect, because it's like, you can come and be the man here. You can come and run the show. You're not just another amazing player, Galactico style. You can come and be our talisman and really carry this team moving forward. I think the Dortmund Klopp link is important to it as well, because everybody there will be speaking highly of Klopp and how he can really help shape the player and shape his career, and I think it just makes sense. So I don't think the Champions League comes into it, to be honest. From a business point of view, from an FSG point of view, and the sort of uncertainty off the pitch, again, I don't think that comes into it, because as a business transaction, this makes all the sense in the world. He's not a 28-year-old player at his peak that you're throwing 150 million on, giving him a mega deal contract. That's his last contract that he's ever going to get. He's right at the start of his career. So you'd imagine, he is only going to appreciate in value. And you'd also imagine that, worst case, Liverpool drop off a cliff. So from the owner's point of view, if Liverpool drop off a cliff, they don't win the Champions League, they fall off in the next 2-3 years, they'll just sell him. And you'd imagine that no matter what, he retains his value. So I think you get the money back that way. And when it comes to wages, we know that Liverpool like to structure deals in wages really incentivised. So I think that'll be a big part. And if you're Jude Bellingham, you're backing yourself to sort of hit all those things. So I think it's just a deal that makes sense for everyone, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Ian, Shaun touched on the off-the-pitch uncertainty there, and this is a pursuit that's believed to be led by Klopp, and I guess that's kind of unsurprising with Julian Ward stepping back at the end of the year. Mel already put out something on Twitter that kind of I wanted to discuss and get your thoughts on. She said, it's worrying developments at LFC in critical roles. Michael Edwards' exit was sizable enough. Now his successor Julian Ward and Director of Research Ian Graham, widely viewed as the best in the business, will also depart as well. All while Michael Gordon takes a step back. She puts too much change. Do you think that will have a big impact on any potential transfers coming in, or do you think that's something that Liverpool will have to just solve relatively quickly ahead of the next season?
It can't help, because all of a sudden what's got them to the kind of top table in terms of how they've worked behind the scenes, that's just disappearing. So it can't be a good thing. And listen, maybe the manager wants to get more involved in some of this.
Do you think that's a good thing, though, of Klopp getting more involved in transfers? Because we've seen at other clubs, particularly at Chelsea, really, when it's been led by the manager and then it's not really gelled and the manager's gone and then you're left with all these players. It doesn't seem to make sense. When
Klopp first came in, he seemed quite content, as long as the structure was right, that he wouldn't get too involved in that kind of stuff, because his focus was on the team and what the output of the team was, and just obviously coaching the side. But obviously he wanted the final say, and that's right. He should have the final say in terms of who comes through the door. He should get a big say, because he's brilliant at what he does, and he'll know the type of players that are going to be able to come in and lift this team and elevate this team. But that said, I'm not sure you particularly want Klopp being too distracted from what he needs to do with the side from a coaching point of view. So it's really important that Liverpool get the balance right here. And I think at the minute, what Mel's saying there, it kind of resonates with me. It just feels like there's a lot of stuff has happened behind the scenes, and I don't know whether actually there's been enough made of it. You know, all of a sudden Mike Gordon's doing this role where he's facilitating and trying to bring people together to maybe look at coming in with some kind of investment. And we know Jurgen's had strong relationships with some of those people that you've mentioned behind the scenes before. So it feels a bit messy to me now, and I think Liverpool do need to do something to get that back on track. In terms of the Bellingham point, I think obviously everyone would want him at the club. There's no doubt about it. His talent it's beyond his years, to be honest. And you get another glimpse of what he's about as a footballer, where he's the first person to go over to Kane when he misses the penalty. He's 19 years of age. He's 19. What are the 19-year-olds doing that, by the way? He's just thinking about kind of getting back into position and starting again. But his first thought was, I'm going to go and speak to the captain and make sure his mind and his focus is still on the remaining, whatever it was, 6-7 minutes, because there's still a job to be done. That's incredibly mature. How he gives interviews off the pitch is incredibly mature. It's ridiculous, to be honest. It's quite frankly ridiculous that a 90-year-old is conducting himself both on the pitch and off the pitch the way he does. And you can see that's why a lot of clubs will want him badly, not just Liverpool. You know, Pep Guardiola's spoken about him countless times. Real Madrid will want him because you can see that this lad is going to be bringing ridiculous amounts of talent. He's a level-headed boy, and you're going to get probably, 12, 13 years out of him, out at the very highest level. You know, he'll captain probably whatever club he goes to, and he'll eventually captain his country probably as well. I'm sure Trent's will have a saying that if he did come to Liverpool. But I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see what Liverpool do, because we've all alluded to it. There's work to be done elsewhere.
A lot of work, yeah.
And it's hard to envisage, for me sitting here right now, under the current ownership, it's hard to envisage them going and putting over 100 million down when there's so much of the work to be done as well. It's going to take significant funds to strengthen Liverpool in all the areas, because they don't just need one midfielder. They need probably 3, maybe even 4, depending on who goes. And there's lads who are obviously getting a year older as well. So that's going to take a lot of funds. And I've said that on other shows. Liverpool in the past have been able to balance the books a little bit by offloading players and getting in decent funds for them. That's allowed them to then go and do business. And they've not always done that in the same window, but they've always come to a point where they've been able to balance the books there or thereabouts. There's not that many players now who you would want to see leave. I'm talking about, you know, the lads who are worth a lot of money. You wouldn't want to be selling those. So it'd be interesting to see how they are going to structure it to the point where they can still do the deals and bring players in, but actually, how are they doing that? Because is it going to come from investment? Is it going to come from their own money? Because you're not selling Mo Salah, you're not selling Trent, you're not selling Virgil, and they're lads who would command big fees. So I think that's interesting. But my God, if you could get a Bellingham and then still be able to go out and be creative and do some other bits as well, that would be a brilliant end game to get to, because there's no doubt he is one hell of a footballer.
Just on that, Ian, I think it's a good point what you say, but I think that's the counter to that about signing Bellingham would be, you're right, we've got no one you think you could just sell and generate a load of money at the moment. If you have Bellingham in your team, he's someone that, as owners coming in, is almost security that you could just go and sell him for 150 million if you needed money. If you needed money to rebuild Liverpool because we fell off a cliff in 2-3 years, 4 years time, God forbid we do, he's your man to go and sell, and then you rebuild from there. At the moment, there's no one that you'd look at to sell. You know, you're not going to sell Salah.
That's what I mean.
So for me, that's why it does make sense. It's almost like future-proofing, you know what you're going to do in the next couple of years. So, but yeah, it's certainly interesting.
The thing on that though, one, as good as he is, and he's brilliant, one lad doesn't solve Liverpool's midfield problems, and that's the thing. If they're going to have to be creative in what they do elsewhere, because they're going to lose Chamberlain, they're going to lose Milner, Keita's probably going to leave as well. So just from a numbers point of view, it can't just be one guy. So they have to do more. And also, if you're Bellingham and you're going to make a decision on your future, I think he will want to play in the Champions League for obvious reasons, but maybe he'd consider a year out if he thought, well, actually, it'll only be a year and Liverpool will be back in it again the following year. But he's going to want to know what Liverpool are going to do business-wise, because at the end of the day, he is entitled to want to win the biggest prizes because he's that good, and he should be playing at the very highest level. So if you're him, he'll say, yeah, I'm coming, yeah, I'll come. But what else are we going to be doing? Because I want to know who I'm going to be playing with. And I know we get on with Jordan Henderson, but Jordan Henderson's 32. And he probably has seen Thiago play for Barcelona and Bayern, thought, yeah, he's brilliant. But Thiago was also the wrong side of 30. He's probably not got that long left in him in terms of, you know, at the very highest level. So he will have expectations on what else the Liverpool are going to do. because and that's right. He should have those expectations, and I think that will be interesting. So yes, the sell, come and work with this brilliant football manager. He's unbelievable. He's one of the top 2 in the world. That's a massive pull, of course it is. But he will also want to know what Liverpool looks like in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years down the line, because that'll be important to him. He'll want to be competing and winning the biggest prizes.
But what's difficult, I think, for all of us and probably for a lot of people internally as well, is we don't know how everything that's happening is going to knock onto everything else.
Absolutely.
So we're discussing the sale, and then we're discussing Julian Ward, and we're discussing Klopp and all these things. We don't actually know, the impact that they're going to have on transfers, they're going to have on the pitch, they're going to have on the off-the-pitch stability. And it's difficult at the moment to piece all the pieces of the jigsaw together and then try and come out with a picture which we just ultimately don't have.
No, and it's funny because I've tried to do that so many times. I've tried every time there's a new nugget of information.
Listen to the gutter last Wednesday to hear us trying to do that.
Yeah.
It drove Neil mad, that show.
It's like we've all got too used to true crime podcasts and we all just think that we are all geniuses. But that's the point because, we take the mick, but when we're talking about games and we're talking about footballers, we can do the assessment because we can watch the games. We see all of that bit. But when you're talking about the owners and the sporting directors and the people who do the research, we don't see any of that. So we're only going on the little bits. And to be honest, they all work very hard to make sure we don't see them, which kind of makes it worse. So it's understandable that all of our kind of hypotheticals and our imagination can kind of get run away with us, because these things are important and these decisions will matter. I mean, for what it's worth, I do think in terms of the needing to do Bellingham and something else, that is where this desire for investment has come in, and that's why maybe they ramped it up at the time they did and started releasing it publicly at the time they did, because it's like this need has become a lot greater because now we know that we're in a really good position with Bellingham, but now we also know that we have to do all these other things as well. So that's my positive reading of the situation, is that they've actually been motivated by the situation and they aren't going to let it slip in the way that they have or be too cautious in the way that they have previously. But in terms of kind of getting any real grasp on what they are going to do, we have to wait till January. Well, I was going to say January 1st. More likely it's going to be January 26th, but you get the point.
Just on, like, again, going back to the internal stuff, I think because we're all fanatics and we all care a lot about what's happened, we overanalyse everything and we talk about behind the scenes, particularly stuff that we don't know about quite a lot. The one thing I'd say about like who's going to be in charge of transfers and who's going to do things and be successful is Michael Edwards was here before Klopp, so he was doing that before Klopp, but no one spoke about him before Klopp. So I feel like Klopp's that you've got to put your faith in him, that no matter who's around and no matter who's sort of in that role, he'll sort of drag them to a level that he does with the players that get brought in, because there's no doubt in my mind that the players only turn out to be as good as they are because of the coaching and everything that Klopp and his coaching staff do with the players. So I'm less concerned about the internal stuff. When I say internal, I mean sort of the fellas in suits and the roles that they're in. It is a bit of a shock maybe to see such a big exodus of sort of senior directors leaving, but at the same time, you know, we don't really talk much about other clubs' senior directors, do we? And it never makes a news story when another club's senior directors moves on, and you know all the things about sort of who's the FSG guy? See, I've forgot his name now. The one at the top who's now gone in to facilitate the sale. Mike Gordon, yeah. So, you know, all about him moving into that role to facilitate the sale, that's just normal. Like, that happens. If the most senior man at the football club is going to go and facilitate potential investors and sell the club to them, because, you know, who else would you want to do it? So I'm less worried about the internal stuff. Obviously, it'd be nice if it wasn't going on and we had sort of the continuity that we've had out of previous years, but you've got to just put your faith in Klopp, and if he's there, everything will be all right.
One thing I would say about that particular part is that the relationships between them all is probably the reason why it doesn't work. So when you're saying no one was talking about Michael Edwards, it's because him and Brendan Rodgers were butting heads all the time, and no one really kind of worked well in that scenario. Whereas you look at the fact that Ian Graham and Michael Edwards worked together at Spurs, and then they wanted to work together, and one of them recruited the other one. They basically built that little team like the A-team or something. So I'm concerned if the three of them, like Ian Graham, Michael Edwards, Julian Ward, suddenly appear together at a different club.
Yeah.
That would be bad. But I take Shaun's point that Klopp is still the most important man in that team. And the kind of personality he is makes me think that he's going to be motivated to do the best to work with these people. It just depends upon the motivations of these people coming in. Again, going back to the things we don't know, is this change because it's motivated by the people who just want to leave to do different things, or is this change motivated by the fact that there's a change of tack and these people don't like it? That's really important, and we just don't know.
We could talk about this all day, couldn't we?
All day long.
If you want more, Rob Gutman has been guttering his head off every week, and it'll ramp up even more as January pulls even closer. So do download the app and you can listen to that. You've also got John on there speaking to Christian Falk about the Bellingham news, so get yourself involved in that as well. But Ian, Liverpool played a game of football yesterday. They played Lyon, they lost 3-1. They scored really early on. Salah missed a penalty, conceded 3 goals. It was all going on in a pre-season game, but I want to talk about some of the key takeaways, and Matip and Naby being back was obviously a big positive. How much of a role do you think either of those players have to play in the next stage of the season?
I mean, cards on the table, I've seen none.
Well, that's why I've asked you a really general question.
Yeah, she just showed you the whole game in that little intro.
I literally just summarised the game because I wasn't expecting anyone to have watched a large amount of it.
I did listen to the post-match show though, so I've got a few bits from that. Naby and Matip.
Yes. You don't need to have seen the game to know.
I know they are. I'm familiar with the work. I think Matip is and has been a really integral part of the squad, and I think you want to see him back sooner rather than later. I think Liverpool's certainly short-term future, you'd say, is probably Konate and Virgil, I think, as a partnership. I think that's what you'd want to see maybe more often than not, but there's a place for Joe Matip because he is such an established footballer in this Liverpool squad now. He's been part of some great things, and I think his levels have been pretty good over the last kind of 2-3 years. He's had those maybe campaigns where he's picked up injuries and stuff, and that's maybe the one cloud where you'd say. And obviously he's had this little spell now, and I think Jürgen talked about they were a little bit worried about him, and I think the backroom team said he needed a bit of time off and he needs to manage his minutes and stuff. So they've done that. But you absolutely want Joe Matip in and around the squad more often than not, because you know what you're going to get from him. You get a lad who's very comfortable on the ball, he'll bring it out, he'll break lines and all that kind of stuff, and he's a really, really top centre-half, very underrated outside of Liverpool Football Club, I would suggest as well. In terms of Naby, I mean, fucking hell.
We've had
a lot of conversations about, and I think, I'm at the point now where I'm on record as saying I think he should have left the club a while ago, to be honest. And that's not to say there's no talent there. He's clearly able to affect football matches to a high level on occasions, but those occasions are few and far between. And people will talk about individual games, and I think people hang on to those games because there's not loads of them. There's like pockets of like 1s and 2s, but he's played really well and he's hit a certain level. I think of City in the FA Cup semi-final. I thought he was outstanding that day, but I think those days maybe are few and far between, and I think you do see a scenario where actually it's coming to an end for Keita, and I think in many ways that's sad, because I think when he joins the club everyone was so excited because you saw or you heard about this footballer that you were getting, and I think everyone had a certain idea about what he was going to be, and it hasn't quite worked out that way for probably lots of reasons. And listen, you feel a bit sorry for him because he has had so many injuries, and it's hard to get any kind of consistency when you are in and out the team, and the manager at times has trusted him with big games. He's given him a platform to go and play in some big football matches, and sometimes it's come off, but quite a lot of the time it hasn't worked, and that's where you end up with Keita. It's just this feeling of what if? Yeah. What if? And that's a big blow, not only for him, but for us, because we put an awful lot of money down for him. It was a lot of money, 50 million quid or 55, whatever it is. So you're expecting big things from him, and it just hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah, Shaun, Liverpool did look strong in the opening stage of the game when they had all their players on the pitch. There was a lot of changes in the second half. It was basically kids playing. But Carvalho made some interesting comments post-game saying that they wanted to make sure that they were pressing with more intent, because he feels like that's something in the first half of the season that they've identified as not doing well enough. And I thought that was something that was really good. So do you agree with that? And also it's just good for these games to have an opportunity to try a few things without all the pressure of getting 3 points and getting through Champions League matches.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with him. I think the first goal comes from a really high press, doesn't it? So that was really good to see.
Yeah, you've watched the highlights.
As I said before, I was aware the game took place. But, so, really, it's great to see, because that has been our identity for so many years, and that's what's been lacking this year. There's no denying it that we have not been as much of a high press team this year. But, a lot of that's down to personnel, or that's down to different styles of play and working out what our style of play is amongst all the injuries that we've had in the mix of it. But if that's what they're focusing on in Dubai, and that is the focus of getting back to the high press and becoming a really high press team again, then I'm all for it, to be honest.
Yeah, Murray played Salah on the right, Bobby was through the middle and Carvalho on the left. Do you think that's an attacking trio we could see more of as the season restarts?
Potentially. Obviously, we've talked about Salah and Núñez being the main, and with Firmino behind being the main kind of cover for the lack of left forward. But Carvalho did play there for Fulham. He has kind of played in those areas off the bench for Liverpool and not necessarily been at his best, but with every week that goes by, you do wonder about whether or not he's going to be able to go back into that. And I do think that was certainly one of the plans that they had for him when they brought him in. So it'll be interesting to see. I just want to go back to what Shaun was saying about the counter-pressing, because I listened to Klopp's post-match interview and he did very much mention that as well. And I wonder whether or not, because we've spoken about this being the second pre-season, I wonder whether or not they've done something different to what they did in the first pre-season. Because if you remember that first game against Fulham, counter-pressing was nowhere to be seen. And that kind of energy and intensity was missing from that early games. Maybe they felt like whatever it was they did to prepare didn't work and they've tried something different. And so maybe that's why they were all very much keen to see how it was going and they were all very much focused on it. I'd like to think that's the case. It might just be because they know that they've got City up first and that it's always very important in that game. But either way, the fact that it was good and the fact that hopefully it will be the same again against AC Milan, that is something that's going to be so vital to us being able to get back to where we want to be.
Do you think the clean break will help?
I do. I think obviously there's differences between certain players. There are some guys who need a rest, like we talk about with Matip. I do think having the ability to be able to sprinkle him in, as opposed to be able to having to say, okay, Matip's going to have to play 6 or 7 games, is really key. So having him back in the mix, I think is definitely going to be brilliant. But I think there are some players who would have wanted to be back in action by now, who are probably going to have ants in their pants. One particular Egyptian fella, I think we all know. So it will
hates resting. If he's resting, he's taking nice photos apparently nowadays.
Oh, you know that he's
on photo shoots.
He was having like 4 small-sided matches with the family in the back garden and keeping score as well.
Top scorer.
Oh yeah. He made himself a little golden boot over there. But I think for as I say, all the squad's different and everyone's going to come at different points. But I think having this opportunity with the camp to kind of have a reset and say, look, okay, what's happened so far this season has not been what we wanted, but we're still in this, we're still in this, we're still in that, we're still all of us, and we can go again.
Yeah, Ian, Salah missed a penalty. I'm going to let you into a spoiler there. Probably a good time for him to miss a penalty on the balance of things. But my point was that Firmino was actually the one that won the penalty. He was involved in the goal as well. I think he's one of the players you could point at and think, okay, this break is going to really have benefited him with his age and with the form that he was in and everything.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think, back to most point, hopefully it will have benefited, lots of them and stuff. It's very much on my mind that there's a game a week on Thursday against Man City, and it'll be here before we know. But yeah, I think you'd expect Firmino to be playing quite a few minutes in terms of we've talked about the fact that actually we're not going to have a couple of players in the forward line for a number of weeks, if not months. So I think you are going to be asking Bobby to kind of probably play a lot more football than he was expecting. I think I'm not saying he would have accepted a bit part role, but I think before the season started, he'd have looked around, he'd have been aware of his age and maybe 1 or 2 limitations that are coming into his game, and he probably would have thought, well, I'm not going to get loads and loads of minutes here, but it's not turned out that way. He's played loads of football, and to be fair to him, I touched on it earlier in the show, he's probably brought more goals to the party than most people would expect him, but I do think there are still times where he looks like maybe slightly beyond his years in terms of his performances, not his goals. His goals have been a massive boost, but I think you can just see in certain games he looks a little bit leggy or a little bit tired, and he's not quite got the kind of the movement maybe he had a couple of years ago. But yeah, you'd expect him to play a lot of football over the coming weeks. And the thing with Salah, listen, you've missed a penalty, it won't bother him. If you're going to miss a penalty, miss it.
Yeah, I think he did generally just smile afterwards. It was like, that was
he'll have wanted to score because he wants to score in every game, friendly or not.
I don't think he was particularly fast.
But in something like that, listen, get it out the way now, lad, because the real business starts again in just over a week's time.
They also took penalties again after the game. It was
Yeah.
it
I
was,
couldn't believe
it was
that when I heard
3-1
about it, by
down.
the
It
way.
was
I was like, what the
absolutely
fuck's
wild.
going
I
on
was
there?
watching it. I was like, this feels like some weird alternate universe. But Shaun, we play another game on Friday. We're playing AC Milan in the same Dubai Cup, whatever it's called. It feels like a strange second pre-season, but it's actually one where they need to look sharp straight away. It's not like the last pre-season before the season starts where they have a bit more time to get up to speed. They've not really got much time now. Ian mentioned their next game's in 10 days against Manchester City. So do you think they'll be feeling the pressure to get up to speed quicker than in August?
Yeah, I think so. I think August as well, you had the hangover of Paris.
Yeah.
I think we can all look now and say that's, touch wood behind us now. The hangover of Paris, it doesn't feel like it's in my mind anymore. The first few games going to the game after Paris, I felt it. So I imagine if you played in it, if you feel it a lot more. So I think that's good. I think what they've got the hangover of is the bad start to the season, but they can still affect that. So I think that's really important. And I think that they can sort of, if we know anything about Klopp and this management team, it's that they're really good at motivating players to maximise their ability. And I feel like that's where we're at now. Okay, guys, what's happened. Even looking at Naby Keita, I know you're quite critical of me, and I've been really critical of him, to be honest. I actually feel like when he did get injured at the start of the season, that was the moment when Klopp was like, he was the most visibly frustrated.
Yeah.
I feel that's when he thought, I've put all my eggs in this basket this season and it just hasn't worked out, and that's going to be a problem for us. And I think we've seen that it has been a problem for us in midfield. But I feel like you can look at the likes of Naby Keita and say, do you know what, lad, it's happened now. Whatever's happened. Just go and prove yourself, go and prove you are a top quality player for the second part of the season. You might be playing for his next club, and that could be a motivation for him. So I feel like it's just a big collective opportunity for everyone, us as fans included. I think the fans have been good this season. I think the atmospheres have been good. I feel like it's now time that we pull together again and go on a big push and get whatever we can from the end of the rest of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Mo, do you think if you're putting manager hat on, he'll be working towards City is the one he wants to have his key players back for, and then give them a bit of a run out in that game ahead of Boxing Day? Or do you think Boxing Day will be the focus?
It's difficult because obviously if this was anyone other than Man City, we'd all say absolutely played like two halves. But with it being Man City and with it all the games between these two sides having some kind of extra meaning, I think he would be tempted to go stronger than he would do otherwise. I do still think that the players who have come back from the World Cup in particular will not play full game. To be honest, I'd still be tempted to start with Matip and Gomez. I think that it's mad. Like, they should be a better partnership than they are when you look at the qualities that they've got as two players, but they always seem to be a little bit shonky at the time. So whether or not he'd be worried about that for Man City, but I don't know. I just think that they should be able to get it together. But what we were saying before about Virgil in terms of the mental hangover, but also in terms of the fact that he's not going to get any other breaks between now and the end of the season.
No.
So it might be in his mind to think, well, maybe I can hold him back a little bit. We've got two quality centre-halves here. We should be able to get through this game. Other than that, I think we're going to see most of the players who haven't been involved are going to in the World Cup are going to play. Alisson's a difficult one because, he's Alisson. He can do what he wants generally. But other than that, I think getting a win under your belt against a good team, on the one hand, you can say, yes, it's the perfect start. We're still in the next round of another competition. We've beaten one of the best teams in the league again. Let's go forward from here. But then I also think that we did that the first time and it didn't do any good.
It didn't do any good. Last thing on this one, Ian, is the fact that all the players coming back, they'll all be match fit, won't they? They'll all been in training. So if anything, they need a bit more of a break. But I think all of them you expect to be ready to go for City or Boxing Day, whichever it is he decides to aim for. Yeah,
I mean, I think he'll probably maybe want to give one or two a little bit of a break after the World Cup and stuff, but not too long, because as you said, they've been playing games and stuff. But most points right, it has been an intense period for them, so he might want to take that into account. But I think you might just get players saying to him, I want to go again, boss. I'm ready just to go. Just play me and stuff. I think, Jordan Henderson's always been of that mindset, I think, where even if he's been in the tournament, he's always been a player who wants to come back early and just start getting back into the group and stuff. And I don't think it'll be any different for the likes of Virgil. I think Alisson will be the same. I think they'll just want to take the mind off what's been a disappointing World Cup in many ways, where they've gone out early, and just start playing for Liverpool again. So I think he'll have players almost kind of beating down his door, saying, listen, I'm ready to go now. I think he will balance it a little bit with the fact who's been with him over this period of time. I think there will be a little bit of that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the big heads playing against City and stuff. And then I think Boxing Day, you want everyone out there, don't you? But that City game feels big to me. It feels important. I think Liverpool will want to put a marker down. So I think the fact that it is City, I think they will go as strong as they possibly can.
10 days to go. You can tell we're creeping ever closer because I feel like we've got through a lot on that main show. Thanks to Annie for producing. Thanks to Mo, to Shaun, to Ian. That has been the Anfield Wrap. And remember, go and get on the sofa, get your hot water bottle, your hot chocolate, and watch the Klopp documentary and have a lovely week. That's been the Anfield Wrap.